So just, I think, definitely just we get tired of the word unprecedented, but just definitely just a huge transition. I transitioned to telehealth. So that was
Okay.
one of the biggest things for me professionally was I had never done telehealth until COVID hit. And that was definitely a learning curve, but appreciate the opportunity to be able to continue to be able to provide services for people.
So
Folks, this
with
is
this
one of the
big
great-
move to telehealth, I'll always ask people in really interesting niches, some business ideas. Are you using any technology you hadn't used before that you think would be a good investment for my greedy clients?
Interesting. So, I mean, I think some of that is just it just depends on who your clients are, I think. I think for, I really appreciate the electronic health record systems. For me, that's really helpful. And they have some telehealth platforms through that. Yeah, I'm, and luckily I had someone sort of walk me through a lot of the technology. Like the practice owner is the one who invested in a lot of it. And then,
no kidding. Okay.
And then I benefited from her investing in it and her, training me in those areas. Definitely some training courses on, HIPAA in this age, I think, is really important. That, paid for some of those. So, and how to make sure your computer is encrypted and all that stuff, So all of that I think is really important depending on who your clients are. And
so do you think your future would really have the first meeting face-to-face and then telehealth from there, or even not even the first meeting face-to-face?
I really think the options are open at this point. I think that, I definitely plan to leave it open to the clients. I would prefer to have the first session in person if possible, but if that's a barrier for any reason, then I believe the first session, I've had successful first sessions over telehealth. So I, believe that's possible. It's definitely here to stay.
Mm-hmm. So Graham, how's that book tour going, buddy?
First of all, I'd like to say this is one of my favorite people in the world who's joining us today. And I am very pleased that I won't include this in my formal introduction, but the story goes, I met my wife at Georgeann's wedding. So my wife and Georgeann were really good friends when they got their PhDs at the University of South Carolina. And in 2003, August 2nd, I believe was the date, I attended Georgeann's wedding and met Sarah at the reception. She'd obviously had way too much to drink to come up and approach me. And we've been married for 14 years. And the sad part of it is that Georgeann and Sarah were great friends, but now due to that circumstance and having to put up with me for 14 years, Sarah hates Georgeann for that. So that's the end of the story. But, truly one of my great friends here today, and I'm looking forward to introducing her, and really glad she's made the time.
I'm glad you know Graham well enough that you know that he is joking. So
the book tour is going great. We're one sale away from hitting 1,600. So if anyone is still contemplating buying the book, you'll make my day with one sale. But we're doing really well. We've done a lot of podcasts, a lot of webinars. We've got a webinar today at 1:00, so I'm gonna have to jump off. I think we have 300 people on the webinar. So
that's great.
But yeah, it's gonna be shipped in about 5 weeks. So we're excited. I want to prove to the world I could read and write, and hopefully this does it.
Yeah, top to bottom, left to right, a group of words together is a sentence. Right.
My co-author, I think we're presenting in March, and there have only been about 3 people who have gotten the draft, my mom included. And so basically my co-author and I split the writing of the book is about 50-50. And my mom's about 2/3 of the way through, and she read this one chapter. We have a whole chapter on our mascot program, marketing program. And She goes, that's the very best chapter in the book. I love that. Who wrote that one? And I said, Jerry, my co-author. So thanks, Mom.
Mary and Marge, you guys doing okay? We can all talk about how comfortable Tom Eubanks is in the meantime.
I was just noticing that he looks like he's in a sunny locale.
Must be Greenwood.
No.
Just do a thumbs up.
We'll live.
Oh, certainly. We can hear you now, but no, we'll go ahead and get started. I know we got a busy docket. So thanks everybody for coming today. Just remember to keep yourself muted. And if you are going to speak, just unmute yourself before we speak. We'll be meeting virtual for all February now, and we'll reevaluate what March looks like. It seems like Indiana is doing as well as any state that I've heard of getting people vaccinated. Rafael Sanchez will be hosting our 46th annual Abe Lincoln Award ceremony on Zoom this year. We are excited about our upcoming speakers. Next week, we've got Patrick Tam, the CEO of Devour Indy and the Indiana Restaurant and Lodging Association. That is going to be very, very interesting to hear about. I've heard there are new restaurants, opening over the last 6 months, and it'll be curious to get their input for downtown. And then February 11th, we've got Don Kniebel leading our religious harmony panel with Rabbi Sasso coming back, Pastor Shaw, and Rami Shahid. After that, we've got the CEO of Gleaners in March. I hope we can beat your 300 people you have on your podcast today, Graham, for March 4th. We've got the CEO of the IBJ, and we are working on Brainerd later in March, and then Holcomb for June. So this should be an exciting docket as we continue to take advantage of Zoom. You may consider giving to our club in lieu of paying for lunch today. There will be a link in the weekly emails for for PayPal. We are reviewing our bylaws today. Nancy Ulrich and Mr. Stage have put in countless hours refining the nuance of the legalese there. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Nancy and Gary.
Well, thank you, President Eric. Gary Stage very graciously offered to help me with the bylaws review, and you were sent in the newsletter an overview that told you what the 10 changes were. We made 10, and then you had a link to the actual document. So why don't I would like to share a document, and I don't understand why I could share it just a minute ago, but I'm not pulling it up now. Let me get it. So what I'd like to do with Gary's help is to walk through the changes. And first, I guess I'll ask, did anyone see changes that needed to be made that we did not make? Was there anything that you wanted to point out that we missed? Okay. Well, I guess the first change is that these are amended and restated on page 1. But the real first change is on page 3. And this change can be summarized as, well, I'll read it. Donate to the Kiwanis Foundation of Indianapolis an amount determined by the Board of Directors by 2/3 vote of the entire board, with changes in the amount of the annual donation being subject to approval by 2/3 vote of the voting members present at any meeting, upon having been given 2 weeks written notice. And so this refers to members, and we've always had a request for donations, but the amount has changed over time, and so we just clarified, and we were not specific deliberately to allow any board to be able to determine the amount. Is there any discussion on that change? It's really more of a clarification. Okay, moving right along, we'll go to page 5. So on page 5, Article 3, Section 12, so down at the bottom, we clarified the definition of what is a voting member, because it really wasn't clarified anywhere in the document. And this says voting member definition: the following classes of members shall have voting rights: active, senior, family, associate, junior, and corporate. These are the voting members.
I would just
Honorary,
add that this is not a substantive change. It's really just a clarification of what we already do.
yes. It just pulled everything together in one
Right.
place. And it says that honorary members do not vote. Is there any discussion on that item? If not, we'll move to page 7. So on page 7, Article 6, Section 1, we added the term assistant treasurer. We added the assistant treasurer role to be appointed by the president to act in the event that the treasurer was unable to serve. And that last sentence says the president shall appoint an assistant treasurer to serve during the temporary absence of the treasurer. The assistant treasurer shall be a non-voting member of the board of directors. Is there any discussion on that item? Okay. The next item, pardon me, the next item is an addition to the bylaws. There had never been any term limits for any of the officers or for board members, but that will come later. So this is about officers. Section 5, any officer may be reelected for the same office no more than a total of 3 terms, whether served consecutively or with interruption. Is there any discussion for that? These would be officers of the club. Okay, moving right along, page 8. This was just a typo, and Gary caught it. Page 8, Section 4. Now we've changed to looking at directors, board of director members, and Section 4. Any elected director may be reelected for no more than a total of 3 3-year terms, whether served consecutively or with interruption. Is there any discussion of those term limits for board members? Okay, our goal is to have as many people be involved as possible. So we'll move right along to page 10. So at the top of page 10, Article 10, Section 1, previously this stated that the length of meetings would be 1.5 hours, and all we did was refine that to the current length. It says regular meetings shall be no more than 1 hour in duration, except on special occasions as approved by the board of directors. Any discussion for that? So far, Gary, we're doing all right.
I wish we could calm down the debate a little bit. It's a little
I know.
bit heated, you know. It's
Okay. On page 10, towards the bottom, section 2, what we did is clarified the voting process because it had been very, very specific. And we've in fact shifted things just a little bit. And while we wouldn't want to say that you couldn't have a skit, we don't always have skits now. So currently the change reads, section 2, the nominating committee will finalize and present the slate of candidates to the members for election at or before the weekly club meeting during the second week in April. Skits, if applicable, or brief candidate presentations may be presented at the weekly club meeting during the fourth week of April, and the election shall occur at the weekly club meeting during the first week in May. Elections shall be done electronically or by paper ballot to be received by the club office by noon on the day of the election. Is there any discussion of that particular change? It's really a clarification, and I think Gary did a great job on making it succinct. Okay, our next change is on page 12. We have 15 pages, so we're whipping right through these. Page 12, section 4. Okay. This has to do with, and I'm going to show it on both pages. This has to do with speakers being invited to the club. And all this does is formalize what actually has been happening, and we simply put it in writing. So section 4, this club shall not be used in any way for political purposes, nor shall it as a club actively participate in the political candidacy of any person. After the primaries, if a candidate for political office serves as a speaker at a club meeting, his or her opponents seeking election to such office shall also be invited to serve as a speaker at a club meeting. Now, they may or may not accept, but we want to make sure that we invite their opponent to also speak. Is there any discussion of this item? I can tell this is all very controversial. Let's see. The change in section 1 is just to use the term voting members. Let's see. Page 13, we have our last change. Oop, I'm sorry, I went past it. Did that. Sorry. Section 1. So this last change is Article 15, Section 1. And it says the initiation fee payable upon election to membership and the annual membership dues shall be as determined by the board of directors by 2/3 vote of the entire board, with changes in the annual membership dues being subject to approval by 2/3 vote of the voting members present at any meeting, upon their having been given 2 weeks notice, written notice of such proposal change? Is there any discussion on that item? Well, that completes all of the changes that were made to the bylaws. And so now with Taylor's help, I'd like to have a vote by all of the members present. And you should see a box on your screen that asks for a yes or no vote.
Good job, Taylor.
Yes, thank you so much, Taylor. This makes it much easier. The votes are still coming in.
Their own little telethon. We're looking for 41 votes. We got 22. Go.
It would look like the ayes have it. We have 20. Oh, they're still voting?
So we had a 15-minute cap on this, right? No, I'm just kidding.
Yes.
Do we need 2/3? What was the number we need to formally accept it?
It's at the end of the, it's the very
It's
last
2/3.
item.
Yeah, it's
It's
2/3.
2/3.
Yeah, that's right.
Need one more person to vote. Please. It should also be noted that we have some guests on this call that would not be voting members. So well, we're now past 70%, so we're okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Nancy.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Gary,
Welcome.
too.
Very much appreciated.
Sure thing.
Well, it was our pleasure, and I couldn't have done it without Gary's help.
No,
Thank
that's
you
good.
so much, Gary.
My pleasure.
That was very thorough. That was very thorough, you two. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will turn it over to Foundation President Graham Honaker, who will introduce today's speaker, Dr. Georgeann Brown, psychologist, COVID-19's effect on mental health anxiety levels.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is a real honor today to introduce one of my great friends. If you weren't on earlier, I met my bride at Georgeann's wedding, so I owe her a great deal. But she is just a tremendous person and professional. Georgeann is a clinical psychologist, mental health advocate, and nonprofit volunteer. She is currently in private practice at True North Counseling and Development in Lexington, Kentucky, with a focus on treating anxiety. She's worked as a clinical psychologist in various settings for the past 16 years, including helping to start Transylvania University's on-campus counseling center in 2007 and through 2016. She serves in multiple roles, promoting mental health advocacy through the Kentucky Psychological Association, including chairing the past 8 legislative days for psychologists at Kentucky's Capitol in Frankfurt. As I recall, she was in DC lobbying for this initiative, I think a couple days before COVID broke last March. Georgeann also serves in various board positions for community nonprofit organizations, including Aaron's Hope for Friends, a nonprofit organization helping to provide social opportunities for teens on the autism spectrum. She graduated from the University of South Carolina in 2006 with a doctorate in clinical community psychology. My wife, Sarah, was in her class, and she trained at the VA hospital in Cincinnati, Ohio in 2005, 2006, focused on treating PTSD and dual diagnoses. There's no truth to the rumor that she's now treating my wife for PTSD for being married to me. That is not true, but really honored to have her on. We thought last fall mental health is a real aspect that many of us are dealing with during the pandemic, and probably one that's not talked about enough. So Georgeann, thank you for taking time. We're honored to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to share my screen, and I am not the most technologically savvy person, but I have adapted, as we all have. So just a moment. All right. Okay, looks like you guys can see my screen. Okay. I think that will work. Let me just see. Okay. Oh, here we go. There we go. That's a little bit better. Okay. Thank you so much for having me. This is not the first time I've been in front of a Kiwanis group, but it is the first time since high school, and the first time I haven't been in a school choir. So back in my high school days, every year we would, in Ashland, Kentucky, where I grew up, we would sing in front of the local Kiwanis club, and it was definitely one of the highlights. I loved being able to get out of school for a few hours, and that was an excused absence, and singing for the Kiwanis Club. And we always got to hear a little bit of their meetings while we were waiting. So as I was listening to your proceedings, it reminded me of those days of long past. So I really appreciate Graham inviting me, and you're having me. You know, back in September, I was like, this is a great idea. As I was working on this topic, this is a very broad topic, and it is not meant to cover everything there is to know about COVID-19 and anxiety. And as we all know, there's been a lot of other things that have happened this year besides COVID. So acknowledging that this has been a stressful year, just, you know, political differences and the election, and you know, lots of things, the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, and discrimination. And there's been lots of things at the forefront of this year. So when we talk about the stress of COVID-19, we're definitely not talking about these problems happening in a vacuum, but I'm just going to skim the surface. And my goal today is to just give you information about anxiety. I do hope to destigmatize anxiety and mental health problems and make people feel more comfortable to get help and recognize when there is a problem. And I do want to provide next steps, both, you know, seeking help and what to do about anxiety, but also just some policy suggestions too. I had a chance to reach out to Indiana Psychological Association, and they gave me some steps forward. Since I'm in Kentucky, I wanted to make sure I got some state level information for Indiana. I'm assuming most of your members are from Indianapolis. Is that correct? So, okay, great. So I am going to use the words stress and anxiety somewhat interchangeably in this presentation. Technically, they're not, you know, anxiety is more of a clinical term, but just, you know, most of us understand what stress is. All people experience stress, and that's usually a result of, you know, a trigger, a way to, you know, whether it's short term, long term. And many of us are familiar with the mental and physical symptoms associated with stress. It could be worrying, anger, fatigue, muscle pain, digestive troubles, and difficulty sleeping. I do realize with my sharing screen, are you all, let me see if I can change my view really quick. Okay, let's see. Hold on. Is that okay? Because you guys can see all the other people. I don't know if that's distracting. I'm trying to figure out how just to show my face, but that's okay. All right. We'll just, if that's okay for you all, doesn't distract you, we'll just go with that. So anxiety is our body's reaction to stress, our perceived threat, and it's very adaptive to have anxiety. I mean, you know, part of the reasons our ancestors survived is because they had anxiety. There was a threat, and they were able to perceive it ahead of time. They were able to avoid that threat. They were able to stay alive. And so part of anxiety is very adaptive. But we do know that anxiety sometimes, you know, that survival instinct and that being, you know, being risk averse, you know, it is adaptive, but it can kind of go haywire for us. It can be a little bit too much. Sometimes we perceive a lot of risks, and maybe there aren't as many really out there as our brain is thinking. Our amygdala is a part of our brain that really tries, you know, remembers, you know, the threat and tries to, and it kind of goes into overdrive sometimes. And when anxiety becomes a problem, you know, it's usually when it interrupts with your daily functioning. I usually kind of use, and not just me, but psychologists typically, you know, say if it's really bothering you more than an hour a day, then it could be considered, it could be clinically significant. And if it's clinically significant, it could be an anxiety disorder. And there are lots of different anxiety disorders, and I don't want to go too in depth about each one, although we'll skim that a little bit. But there are symptoms of anxiety. A lot of worrying is definitely at the top of the list. There's physical symptoms. You can see some of those that are on the side. I'm sorry that I can't get all of them because the pictures, but I can definitely share this presentation later, to this group. But muscle tension and falling insane asleep, restlessness, a lot of physical things. We do know that anxiety can go on to have more long-term effects on our health, high blood pressure, and things like that. So anxiety often does lead, avoidance is a hallmark of anxiety. It leads us to try to avoid the threat and the risk to minimize negative impact. Okay, so I am going to... Okay, so what we know about COVID-19 and anxiety is it is a unique situation because there are some natural things about COVID that have made, maybe some anxiety problems worse, and definitely has caused stress. I think probably all of us have experienced some stress related to COVID-19, regardless of what our situation is. So some things, because anxiety is telling us to avoid risk, this is how it can make some issues a little bit worse. And I don't want to give you a full clinical picture of each of these disorders, and please feel free to look these up if you have questions about what these are. But one is, the intrusive thoughts. So OCD, a lot of us are familiar with obsessive compulsive disorder as, some people are, the cleaning is the most common manifestation or the picture that people see. OCD can, really the intrusive thoughts can be anything, but one of the most common things are, the fear of germs and wanting to, keep your hands clean and things like that, and over hand washing. So OCD is a lot more complex than that. But for those that have OCD, it can certainly exacerbate fears of getting sick. For those that maybe are worried about getting others sick, have intrusive thoughts about that, it can definitely exacerbate those symptoms. Agoraphobia, the fear of going into public places, that can definitely be exacerbated during this time. Just because, there are a lot of reasons to stay home. We've been told to stay home. And then, you go out, and I even found myself every time I go to stores and I would be seeing all the people that didn't have masks on and be thinking about, okay, what was I exposed to? And, sometimes, this can be really get to the point where people don't want to leave their home at all. And maybe they don't even want to step on their front porch. Maybe they feel like, could be as severe as that, where they feel like even going to the mailbox is risky. Social anxiety is, typically, anxiety where we're concerned about the way that others are perceiving us and reacting to us. And we often may avoid social situations because of that. And, COVID, because of social distancing, I think it's presented new ways where people are, maybe they haven't had the opportunity to practice their social skills. There are new rules. We're not really hugging anymore. We're not, we can't really see everybody's whole face, just trying to how close do we get? There's all these new rules to figure out. And that could definitely exacerbate social anxiety. Hoarding, we all saw lots of hoarding behavior at the beginning of the pandemic. And sometimes it still is happening. We may hear through the grapevine that toilet paper is is not available, and so everybody rushes out and tries to find their toilet paper, and whatever it is, Clorox wipes or the things that we think that we're going to need. And typically that is it comes from perceived scarcity or actual scarcity, and we need this sense of control, and we want to avoid the risk of not having what we need. So hoarding is definitely something we've seen. Post-traumatic stress is sort of a whole different ballgame, and that's when people have experienced something really stressful and upsetting. And we know that lots of people have, most of us know someone who has died this year, either from COVID or they've died from another another reason and haven't been able to be surrounded with their loved ones. And, we might have known someone who committed suicide. We might have, know someone that's been hospitalized for COVID. We've had frontline workers who have put themselves at risk and maybe didn't have the right PPE, and exposed to all these kind of traumatic things. These, having an ER. I have several friends that work in the ER, and just hearing some of their stories. So this has definitely been something that's been happening. And then, also there are a number of people who are very fearful of the vaccine. There's at least 30% of our population who is fearful of it and concerned that it is, that it maybe it was rushed, or maybe it's some effort from the government to control us, or there's lots of, fear surrounding this vaccine. So this is just skimming the surface. There's lots of other unique situations, but this is just some unique ways that COVID has affected different types of anxiety. A lot of the information that I took today is from the American Psychological Association, and especially this Stress in America survey that they gave. If you haven't looked at it, I think it's a good read. I try to include some of the graphics associated with that. What we do know is that nearly 8 in 10 Americans say the pandemic is a significant source of stress in their life. We also know that 7 in 10 say they've experienced increased stress over the course of the pandemic. So, this is definitely higher than APA does this survey every year. This is a lot higher than typical years when they survey our population. I do believe this survey was given. This came out in October. I think the actual survey was given in August, and so it could be even higher right now. So things are just changing every month, really. The CDC also did a survey. On this one, I'm not able. Here, let me see if I can get rid of. So, okay, briefly, this on the side of this other slide, I do talk about protective factors and then stressors. So I'm not going to read all of those verbatim to you, but you can kind of see, protective factors are those that kind of keep people in a healthier place. They keep us, they sort of balance out some of the stressors. So having good social support, financial stability, healthcare, those types of things are really helpful for us. And then we have the traumatic stressors, which we talked about on the other slide. And then we have the general stressors. And, this is, again, not an exhaustive list, but these are just some of the factors that are going into our stress level. Okay. So the CDC chart here shows that over 40% of the U.S. population of their survey population of 5,000 adults said that they had experienced at least one adverse mental health, behavioral health problem. The surveys that they gave in prior years were a little bit different, so I didn't put comparison data on here because the time, but they do see that this has a significant increase. I think like suicidal ideation is up 10%, is 10% of those that were responded to the survey, whereas in previous surveys it's closer to 4%. So you can see here that anxiety is definitely the one of the biggest thing that people report. So anxiety is definitely what we're seeing. That does match, in a given year. Anxiety typically is the most common mental health problem that most people cite. It's usually has a lifetime prevalence of a third of U.S. Americans say they have some sort of anxiety disorder in their lifetime. But we definitely have seen an increase this year. So we do know that nearly 1 in 5 adults say their mental health is worse than this time last year. And I think this breaks it down by generations. And I don't have the exact years for you on generations. Please feel free to look that up. But, Gen Z are our youngest adults right now, the 18 to 23 adults. We've got millennials and Gen X boomers and older adults. Our Gen Z adults are the ones that we're pretty worried about right now. The data is showing that they are kind of expressing the most concerning thoughts and feelings and behaviors right now. A lot of times I think we were very worried about our older population, and there are definitely many people that are super isolated or that are older that are in situations. I do think that there is a theory that some of our older adults have more of a lifetime perspective about this too shall pass type of perspective, and this is time limited. Where some of our Gen Z adults, I think, maybe that they're starting their life and they don't see as much hope for their path forward.
So, Dr. Brown, what parallels are you seeing versus how the generations are measuring this environment versus the past? I mean, we like with my dad being retired Navy, we have a lot of veteran clients who sympathize with soldiers in Afghanistan, where it's not a 2-year war, it's a 15-year war. They're not fighting for 6 months, live or die. It's just constant stress. It's always there. So in your field, are they comparing 2020, 2021 to some other environment that you've studied?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I don't know, if I know the complete answer. Anecdotally, I know, my parents are kind of right on that edge of being like a boom. They're born in like 44 and 45. So they're close. They're kind of right in between boomers and the generation right before. And my mom she says this time reminds her a lot of the 60s and how turbulent it was, especially politically. So for her, that's one thing that she compares it to, that this is a very turbulent time. So I do think those people, I do think older people have perspectives, different times in their life where, they can compare. I mean, I think most people, the Spanish flu, that's something that most people don't have a memory of. And so I think, we've been through certain pandemics before, but never quite to this scale before. So I think, this is a new situation for many people currently alive.
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I did want to include, this isn't the greatest graphic in the world, but and then this is but if you want to see how Indiana is doing, really, you can look at any state. The CDC does these pulse surveys once a week, and you can, this is the link that you can look, and then you can look at like the latest data they had was December 9th through December 21st. They didn't have January, but this shows kind of how Indiana is doing in terms of anxiety. So you can kind of see what's going on. Indiana's actually doing pretty well compared to some states. But you can see there it's saying about, there's certain anxiety questions they ask, and you can see what those are if you go to that link. But there's a range between, a percentage between 27.4% to 34.2% of respondents express some anxiety over that December 9th, December 21st period. But that's a good resource if you're looking for specific to Indiana. We do know that more people are seeking mental health treatment, so that's a good thing. We know that, a lot of this is taken from a survey from psychologists, but 3 in 10 psychologists say they're seeing more patients since the beginning of the pandemic, and of psychologists who are providing treatment for anxiety disorders, 74% have seen an increase in demand for their services. I've definitely seen a demand in my services that I'm offering. We are, 30% of therapists said, and this is psychologists, there are other types of therapists too, say that they have not been able to meet the demand for treatment for their patients, because there's been just too many people that have been requesting treatment. So some of this slide, some of this data is reflected in what I already shared in terms of the 78% that said it was a significant source of stress. But nearly half, from the same Stress in America survey, nearly half of adults said their behavior had been negatively affected. You can see there, here, let me minimize. I keep forgetting that you guys have it like the same, you're seeing the exact same thing that I'm seeing. So you can see the end of that slide. So the most common symptoms are tension in bodies, snapping or getting angry, and unexpected mood swings, screaming or yelling at a loved one. So don't feel too guilty if you've done that, because a lot of other people have, apparently. you also can see that, so that I think I shared the graphic of the two and three adults. Suicide is something that's been talked about quite a bit. Our school district is still virtual. I have two children. They have been virtual since March. And I'm starting to see a lot of parents talk about suicide and be concerned about suicide. It's really been, it's a big topic in Kentucky right now. It probably is in Indiana too. I know Las Vegas is opening up their schools because they feel like they've seen increased suicides. Chicago's getting ready to open their schools. Over a third of our kids have been in virtual since March in the US. So we don't quite know the suicide data is the only, anecdotally, I think a lot of people have heard of increased suicides. There has been an increased trend in suicide in general in the past, basically decade or more, 2 decades, that we've seen an increase in suicides, of people dying by suicide. But we don't have the complete picture at this point for this past year. It's hard to, coroners are sometimes don't label something as suicide. Sometimes, an overdose might be labeled an overdose, even though it was a suicide. Maybe because of stigma, some people don't label a death a suicide. So we don't quite know. Japan did see an increase in suicide when they, when restrictions lifted, when the really during the period where the stay-at-home orders, they didn't see an increase, but once that was lifted, Japan did see a significant increase, and that could be, socioeconomical or, stress of social isolation. We're not, it could be a lot of things. Massachusetts has reported their data, and they saw a decrease in suicides over 2020. So we don't really know yet what the issue is. And then some of the suicides are happening more delayed. I think they're happening, not so much in the midst of like the social isolation part, stay at home, but they might be, just a lot of things building up. We do know that substance use has increased. We know alcohol use has definitely gone up. You can certainly see, there's a lot of funny memes about people drinking, during the COVID, and and it is for many people, it's a real, it has become problematic. And binge drinking has gone up. We do know that those that already had an addiction problem sometimes aren't able to access their AA meetings, and sometimes sobriety has been threatened. And overdoses have also spiked since the onset of the pandemic. There's just so much. There's just so much information in this area. So I am trying to watch time.
Well, Dr. Brown, would you mind real quickly, would you just kind of touch on some of the strategies to relieve the stress? I mean,
yeah.
So my wife and I were actually married on August 2nd also. Nice. So yeah, respect. All right. So but that first March, April, May, when the kids were at home, I'd honestly never seen my wife so upset and so testy and so frustrated. So what are some of the pieces of advice you have for relieving boredom and stress?
Okay, absolutely. And I'm getting to that. So I'm going to skip through these slides just as for time purposes. Just briefly, I think hope is a good thing. So it's good that 7 in 10 Americans say they feel hopeful. So that's good. But yes, I'll go ahead and skip to this. I think a lot of us have probably seen this kind of information before, but I do want to take some time to just reinforce it. I do think it's important to take breaks from just constant consumption of news and triggers and things like that. So anything that we notice increases our stress, social media, that is very important, just to pay attention to what the triggers are for our stress. We do see a huge, like if someone is watching news all day, their anxiety has been shown to be higher for sure. Taking care of our body is very, very important. Deep breaths. I've got a couple screens on here you can even screenshot in a minute. I'll get to that one in just a second. Exercise is definitely super important. Getting lots of sleep, definitely minimizing your substance use. Sometimes it feels like temporarily it helps, but just making sure that is kept in check. Definitely schedule a time to unwind. I think one of the things working from home all the time, we feel like we're on all the time. We have to, but it's making sure that you schedule time for breaks and recreation, making sure we stay connected with other people. This is just a graphic. I'm not going to go over it, but this is one you can share. This is NIMH, has some graphics that you can share with your organization. But this is some coping with COVID-19. Here's the stuff that I love. This is my bread and butter because I love cognitive therapy. So I really feel like it's important to do some cognitive reframing to reduce anxiety. I think a lot of times our anxiety is exacerbated by what our thought processes are. So a couple things I think is just being very compassionate with ourselves. I think there's a lot of, things that we expect ourselves to do. But this is a really challenging time. I tell my clients this all the time, that this is a very challenging time. And, we have to give ourselves grace. I think, beginning of the pandemic, I saw a lot of people say, now's your time to learn a hobby you've never learned and do all these things. And only Graham, maybe, he wrote a book, but Graham is awesome. That's awesome for Graham. But a lot of people, don't function like that under stress. And so I think that, we have to choose to give ourselves grace and just being compassionate. I also think we have to accept uncertainty. Anxiety wants certainty. Anxiety wants us to be able to control everything and to know exactly what's going to happen. And I think, life is filled with risks that we can't predict. And I think, there's a level of acceptance of just saying, no, okay, I'm going to follow the CDC guidelines, but these aren't perfect. And, at some level, we just have to accept, just kind of accept some risk. Like some people are going beyond the CDC guidelines, like they're disinfecting their groceries and their mail, and you can do that, but there's a certain level where you have to just say, I'm going to pick up this piece of mail, and I'm going to, this is a risk that I'm going to take, because the CD, and so I think on some level we have to just accept that that's going to happen. I think we have to focus what's on in our control. I think that, that's important, is to there's so many things that are out of our control. Like what is it? I have my alarm just so I didn't go over, but I am going over, that we have to focus on that. And I think I really encourage people to use the word choose as much as possible, especially in lieu, if you find yourself saying the word should, or have to, or need to, those are words that I think have a lot of pressure to them. And I think, when we use the word choose, that has more of an element of like, okay, we're choosing to do this. This is in our control. And that's something that I recommend. Gratitude. I know many of you are probably familiar with that practice, but I think, every day it's easy to find something that has gone wrong. I mean, there is something that goes wrong every day or doesn't go the way you want it, but gratitude has been shown to increase people's level of happiness and dissatisfaction with life. So I would start with maybe, what are 3 things that went well today? At the end of the day, just saying, here are 3 things that went well. We had a nice dinner. I got to talk to a friend. I had a nice walk, whatever it is, that just doing that. Meditation and mindfulness are very important. Anxiety often resides in the past or the future. We're often thinking about what's going to happen in the future and how to avoid the risk, or what happened in the past and that was really bad and I don't want that to happen again. Being able to stay in the present moment is important. Right at this moment, we have peace. This is a moment where we're experiencing peace. So I think that's important. There's a lot of apps that are great for that. Calm app and Headspace are 2 of my favorites, but there's lots of apps now. Even Peloton is doing meditation and mindfulness. So lots of things out there. I think weighing probabilities. I think if we're worried about risks, we can, just reminding ourselves, okay, this might happen, but it might not. It might not. That anything we do, there's always it might, but it might not, and just remembering that. Exposures, I think, if you're really avoiding something and you don't think it's healthy, then I think it's important to maybe gradually expose yourself to whatever that fear is. So if you're afraid to go to a store or something, then it might be helpful to try to build up to that, to try to like, okay, I'm going to try to go to the store once a week with my mask, to a store where it's not very crowded. And I'm going to try to do that. So just whatever it is, I think that can really help with anxiety. And then again, messages of hope are always that hope slide is important. People tend to respond better to hope than they do to shame and messages of shame. Especially with the vaccine, that's one of the things that they're talking about. Okay, this is a good screenshot one. Here, let me minimize you all. If you want to take a screenshot of this with your phone, this is one where these are 5 science-based tips to manage your stress. And they're very easy to do. And there's actually videos of these on the American Psychological Association site. Okay. And okay, getting help. Please, I hope that everyone here feels like they can get help if they need it. If you're feeling like you're overwhelmed and you're stressed and it's not going away with whatever you're trying, I think, I'm a huge, obviously as a psychologist, I'm a huge believer of therapy and that it works. And the research shows that it works. If you're looking for a therapist, I think one of the best sites for that is psychologytoday.com, because you can put in your insurance, you can put in your issues or what you want to be seen for, and they can pull up all the matches on Psychology Today. The Indiana Psychological Association also has a Find a Therapist, so that's, I think, a really good website. And helping others, encourage other people to seek help if they need it, to destigmatize that. And it's okay to ask people hard questions. It's okay. We know that asking people if they're thinking about suicide doesn't increase suicide. It actually can save their lives if we ask those hard questions. So those are some things to keep in mind. And then, okay, I'm going to just really cover the Indiana one because I know we're almost out of time. But I think it's important to put to think about macro level approaches too, not just what helps us, but what helps our population. A lot of times people are talking about mental health. Let's put our money where our mouth is. Let's make sure that mental health is a priority. And when I talked to the Indiana Psychological Association, they mentioned, their priorities this year are an expansion of telehealth because that increases access to services to people in rural areas, especially. They also have a bill called PsyPact. If you've never called your legislators before, I don't know how it is in Indiana. It's super easy in Kentucky. There's this toll-free number. I'd actually put Indiana's on there. If it's like Kentucky's, you just call and you say, I want to leave a message for my senator. One of the bills for Indiana Psychological Association is called PsyPact, and that will actually help psychologists be able to see people in different states. So if you go on vacation, your psychologist might still be able to see you because of even if you're not in the state. Right now, licensure laws would prevent them from doing so. So this will expand psychological services. And then they also have a number of telehealth bills if you want to get on their website and see what those are. I think parity is one of the bills we have here in Kentucky, but making sure that mental health services are paid at parity with regular health services. So there's some real important macro level approaches where we can make sure that all of our citizens are getting help. If you want to take a quick screenshot of this is just some crisis numbers in case anybody is in crisis. The Suicide Prevention Lifeline is a really good one. And then here are some of my sources. I don't think I put every single source on there, and I didn't professionally cite them just because I wanted you to be able to look up a website. Okay, I know that I took a long time, but I am going to. Was there anything anyone wanted me to go back and if they wanted to take a picture of, or?
Well, Dr. Brown, we are going to post a recording
of great.
the presentation. We will send that out with the weekly email on Monday. I am going to internalize the think of 3 things that went well. Our bylaws review went very well today, and your presentation went very well. So I'll look forward to one other positive moment this afternoon. A small donation was made to the Patachou Foundation. They address pervasive food insecurity in a radically different and better way, serving 1,200 youth each week. I have Miss Sarah Ali from the IPY Circle K, who is going to give us a little update. She had asked our club to participate in a mentorship program in the fall. I'm not sure with COVID how that has all gone. So I'm just asking Miss Ali for a little update today.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Sarah, like Eric said. Thanks for having me. It was a really good and informative session. I learned a lot. And so basically about IUPUI, we had started a Kiwanis / CKI mentorship program, and it didn't really kick off until this month. So there is still time. It's going to be like a rolling application. You can join at any point in time, but we're going to start kicking that off pretty soon here. But other things that are going on, at least with 2020, it was all virtual, after March. And we were able to have Spring Fling, which was a banquet where we invited everyone to come. It was a silent auction, some dinner. But looking forward to 2021, we are planning an event for Jagathon, which is the Riley Dance Marathon at IUPUI. And we're planning an event with like a service project where we're going to be donating backpacks to the kids around Indianapolis to help with that virtual / in-person kind of schooling that's going on. And then we also have elections coming up for our board because our district convention for Indiana is next month. And then we also have a fundraiser, hopefully some kind of quiz bowl virtual event for Delivering Hope and Health, which is a project for Indiana. But that was a really quick summary. I know it's 101. I want to keep it short. Thank you for having me.
You are invited back. With that timeliness, you are invited to speak anytime you want. So next week, please join us for Patrick Tim, CEO of Devour Indy. Devour Indy is going on right now. Please get out and support our local restaurants or get carry out to support our local restaurants. Thanks again for everybody's time. Thanks to Mr. Graham for lining it up, and we will see everybody next week.